Look at a standard textbook map of the Middle Ages. You see neatly defined borders, clear timelines of kings, and a tidy progression from Rome to the Renaissance. It looks like a settled record, but that clear picture is fundamentally broken. Beneath the surface lie pitch-black silence zones, erased records, unmapped underground networks, unexplained mass panics, and uncrackable manuscripts. So why are these massive blind spots still sitting in the middle of our past? Was it just decaying paper, deliberate cover-ups, or was the medieval world operating on a reality far stranger than our modern minds care to accept? Before solving these cold cases, we have to ask a stranger question. Why do we assume medieval people experienced and recorded the world using the exact same logic we do today? It begins long before the modern era with a fundamental survival necessity, the need to record the truth. Monasteries and royal courts created written records to document property, record religious principles, and glorify rulers. But that system of record-keeping had a massive flaw. It was controlled by a tiny fraction of the population. Anything that didn't fit their theological ideas, anything built by common peasants out of fear, or anything wiped out by sudden royal decree was either ignored, reframed, or scrubbed from existence. That selective silence created a massive historical chain reaction. One missing context led to a blind spot. A blind spot turned into a mystery, and over centuries, those mysteries hardened into total historical black holes. Take the underground world of medieval Europe, specifically the Erdstall tunnels. Thousands of these narrow, claustrophobic networks crisscross Europe, stretching from Bavaria to Austria and beyond. They are tiny, winding passages often barely wide enough for a human to crawl through, featuring impassable narrow choke points called slips. And here is the mechanism that breaks our modern logic. Out of the thousands of medieval documents preserved from this exact period, there is virtually not a single written sentence explaining why millions of man-hours were spent digging them. Imagine attempting to navigate a modern city using a map where someone intentionally erased every single highway and street. The physical architecture is sitting right under your feet, yet the written map shows only an empty void. This brings us to the first major complication. We modern observers love simple, clean explanations. When we see a subterranean passage on the map, we label it bunker or storage. But the physical reality breaks those easy rules. The tunnels have no exit points for smoke, meaning they couldn't be lived in with torches. They contain almost no organic remains, ruling out everyday storage or long-term hiding places. Some historians suggest they were spiritual transition spaces, places to trap evil spirits or perform cleansing rituals. But because medieval writers left zero context, the true purpose remains an unreadable blank space on our map. Sometimes, human behavior itself acts like a sudden, unmapped detour in the historical record, operating without leaving a clear biological footprint. In July 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, a woman named Frau Trophäa stepped into the street and began to dance. She didn't stop for days. Within weeks, hundreds of people had joined her, dancing uncontrollably in the summer heat until their feet bled, until they collapsed from exhaustion, or until their hearts gave out. Think of it like a massive surge through an overloaded electrical grid. When extreme psychological pressure builds up with nowhere to go, the entire system short-circuits, forcing an involuntary, destructive discharge of energy. The mechanism here seems like a total nightmare, a community-wide contagion with no virus, no bacteria, and no biological reason. The conventional rule of medicine says that to have an epidemic, you need a pathogen. But the dancing plague of 1518 broke that rule entirely. For centuries, the go-to myth was that the dancers were poisoned by ergot, a toxic fungus that grows on damp rye and causes hallucinations and spasms. But that explanation falls completely apart under close scrutiny. Ergotism cuts off blood supply to the extremities. It makes purposeful, rhythmic, multi-day physical exertion impossible. These people weren't twitching in bed from poison. They were actively, continuously dancing in coordinated, terrifying bursts of involuntary physical endurance. The real driver was likely darker: extreme mass psychogenic illness triggered by starvation, disease, and overwhelming socioeconomic stress. Their shared cultural terror manifested physically, turning their bodies into prisoners of a collective mental breakdown. It shows us that the medieval map contained psychological regions modern science is still trying to chart. And speaking of unreadable regions on our historical map, consider the Voynich manuscript. This is the part most people get wrong. People assume the Voynich manuscript is just a clever Renaissance hoax or a simple cipher that we just haven't been smart enough to break yet. But the manuscript's biological and structural footprint tells a far more disturbing story. Carbon-dated, a scientific technique that measures the decay of radioactive carbon isotopes in organic material to pinpoint its age, precisely to the early 15th century. Its vellum pages, which were crafted from specially prepared animal skin rather than paper, contain an entirely unknown writing system, accompanied by bizarre illustrations of non-existent plants, astronomical diagrams, and naked women bathing in interconnected tubes. For over a century, the world's greatest cryptographers, experts in making and breaking secret codes, have tried to overlay every known linguistic map against the Voynich script. No routes align. Yet, if you run the text through a computer, the word patterns don't look like random gibberish at all. They mimic the natural mathematical rhythm of real speech, following the exact same structural rules as English, Latin, or Chinese. It belongs to no known language family on Earth. Was it the secret notebook of a renegade alchemist? A forgotten dialect completely erased by war? Or an intricate, highly sophisticated cipher designed by a mind operating under a totally different set of rules? We don't know. The text sits there, perfectly preserved, looking right at us, behaving like a territory on a map drawn in a language no surviving culture can read. And yet, perhaps no gap in medieval history is as sudden or as systematically manufactured as the abrupt erasure of the Knights Templar. For nearly 2 centuries, the Templars were the most powerful military and financial institution in the Christian world. They pioneered an early version of international banking. They answered to no king, owned vast lands, and held immense military power. Then, on Friday, October 13th, 1307, the entire order was dismantled in a single, lightning-fast geopolitical strike orchestrated by King Philip IV of France. Within days, thousands of Templar knights were arrested, tortured, and forced to confess to absurd charges: blasphemy, worshipping a mysterious severed head named Baphomet, and spitting on the cross. Years later, their grandmaster was burned at the stake, and the order was officially dissolved by the Pope. Here is the ultimate historical complication. Did a pious order of holy warriors secretly descend into blasphemous behaviors behind closed doors? Or was it the ultimate medieval smear job, a bankrupt king ruthlessly wiping out his debt by liquidating his primary creditor and creating a lie so absurd it permanently poisoned the record? Because the confessions were extracted under severe torture and the Templars' private archives mysteriously vanished from history shortly after their downfall, the truth was systematically scrubbed. The paper trail wasn't just lost to time, it was intentionally burned off the map. These gaps, the silent tunnels, the inexplicable dancing epidemics, the unread manuscript, and the erased military order became far more than just frustrating historical cold cases over time. They became the ultimate canvas for human projection. We fill these empty historical spaces with our own modern anxieties, turning unexplainable medieval events into stories of aliens, ancient magic, secret societies, and shadow governments. But history never set out to leave us an impossible puzzle. It only recorded what it cared about, while human trauma, political cover-ups, and lost cultures quietly swallowed the rest. So why are these massive, frustrating blind spots still sitting right in the middle of our medieval past? Because the medieval world was not a simple stepping stone leading directly to modern logic. Because time eats paper and fear erases facts. And because the people of the past lived in a reality driven by cultural pressures, secret networks, and internal psychological stresses that we are only beginning to decode. The historical record isn't a continuous, pristine highway. It's a map full of deep, dark abysses, and every silent tunnel, every undeciphered page, and every vanished archive is a stark reminder of just how much of human history has slipped forever into the dark.